Okay, so hello everyone, and very warm welcome to today's web seminar of the 5G-ACIA, the 5G Alliance for Connected Industries and Automation. This is already the third web seminar of our current series. We had the first one at the end of June, in which we provided a general overview of 5G for the industrial IoT and what 5G-ACIA is all about. Then we had a second one in July, in which we focused on industrial use cases and requirements. So what can we do with 5G in manufacturing? And today we will deep dive into another very hot and exciting topic, which is particularly relevant for the industrial domain, and this is non-public 5G networks, and sometimes also referred to private 5G networks. So my name is Andreas Müller. I'm in my day job the head of communication and network technology in Bosch Corporate Research in Stuttgart, Germany. But I'm here today in my capacity as general chair of the 5G-ACIA, and I have the pleasure to moderate today's web seminar again. So before we start having a closer look at non-public networks, I would like to say a few words about 5G-ACIA in general. So in short, 5G-ACIA has been established for shaping and promoting industrial 5G and to unlock the huge potential that 5G can bring to the manufacturing industry. And basically that's because we have two major trends ongoing. On the one hand, namely the developments towards 5G, of course, and the major difference of 5G compared to previous generations is that it's not just focused around connecting people, connecting phones, but 5G from the very beginning has been designed for connecting all kinds of things in the Internet of Things. On the other hand, we have the developments towards the industrial IoT, or sometimes also called the fourth industrial revolution, which is all about connecting things in a factory and establishing cyber-physical production systems. And if we now bring these two different developments together, which started independently of each other, that means if we bring 5G to the factories, to the shop floor, then we can achieve unprecedented levels of flexibility, of efficiency, of productivity, and also of ease of use. And that's where all the huge potential of 5G in industrial domain comes from. So 5G-ACIA has been established in order to bring all relevant stakeholders in this emerging ecosystem together. So on the one hand, that's the OT industry, so the classical industrial players like machine builders, industrial automation companies, and also factory operators. And on the other hand, the ICT industry with the network operators, infrastructure vendors, chip manufacturers, and so on. So we need a close collaboration in order to jointly make sure that industrial 5G at the end becomes a major success. And here at the bottom, you can see some of the major objectives that we have in 5G-ACIA. So it starts with establishing a common language. Usually we are talking about what you're using the same terms, but still talking about different things. So that's really a very hard challenge to just make sure that you speak of the same thing. If you talk about latencies, reliabilities, and things like this. We also want to reflect the needs of the industrial domain in standardization and regulation without every industrial automation company requiring to directly go to 3GPP. And of course, it's also the other way around. So we also analyze how 5G may enhance the industrial domain and how we may make best use of it. It's also then about identifying relevant certification and testing needs. So of course, industrial devices have different requirements than consumer devices. So we might need some profiling, some certification procedures to make sure that it's working as expected in a factory. It's also about developing the general ecosystem. And of course, we also do a lot of promotion to promote industrial 5G worldwide. As of today, 5G-ACIA has 70 member organizations. So if you had a chance to participate in our previous web seminars, you probably recognize that we are constantly growing. So as of today, we are 70 members. You can see from the logos, it's already a very good mixture between the OT industry, the ICT industry, also some academic players, and also a very good mixture between the different regions, the geographic regions worldwide. And of course, everybody is welcome to join us. So if you have an interest in industrial 5G, we would be very happy to welcome you as a new member in future. And of course, if you want to get more information, just feel free to visit our website, 5G-ACIA.org. There you can also download many white papers that we have published already and find additional information about what we are doing, who is active, and everything that you need to know. So that was all I wanted to say, is a brief introduction. And let's have a look again at the series of web seminars that we are organizing. So these are the two that we already had in June and July. So today it will be about non-public 5G networks. And then the next one, that's already a brief outlook here, will take place at the beginning of September. And this one will be a panel discussion actually with different representatives of 5G-ACIA, board members, working group chairs, and so on, and some selected guests, where we will have an interactive discussion, a panel discussion on industrial 5G to see what is really realistic, what is already reality, and what may come up in future. We will launch a couple of live polls during the web seminar to get your feedback, also here to keep it a bit more interactive. And it would be great if as many as possible from you would participate in these polls, because this helps us to get some feedback directly from the audience, but is also maybe of interest for all of you. In order to practice this, we have prepared 2 live polls at the beginning. So these are the same questions that we ask every time to get a little bit of feeling of who is in the audience. And the first question would be, which stakeholder group do you belong to? So there should be a window now popping up, so I can already see it. I hope all of you can see as well. With stakeholder group, we mean, do you belong to the ICT industry? Does your organization belong to the ICT industry? Or is it more the OT industry? So be it an industrial automation provider, component provider, machine builder, a factory owner? Are you an academic representative? So are you with a university, a research institute or so? Or is it any other category, government representative, or just someone who is interested in the topic but not really dealing with it? So just make your choice. It's just one click, but it's always interesting to see who in the audience is. And now the time has expired, and now we can see the results. So obviously the majority is from the ICT industry, 55%. That's a little bit in line with the previous web seminars that we had, but we also have some OT representation, academic players, and others. So that's significantly smaller than the ICT representatives. Okay, so that was just for practicing also the live poll. And then the second question would be, where do you come from? Which region do you come from? Also, that's very interesting to see always. I guess the window will come up now. And here's basically just the continent. So are you from Africa, from Asia, Australia, Europe, North America, or South America? That's always also very relevant input for us to see where most interest is in our topics. So we tried to change a little bit the time of the web seminars in the past, so to make sure that it's, well, one's convenient more for people in Asia, and then another one maybe more convenient for North America, and so on. So I think last time we had a very early event, and then we had only very few participants from North America, from South America. I could imagine that it's the other way around today, but that's what we will see in a few seconds. Yeah, we have more participants from North America than last time, if I remember, but still the majority comes from Europe with 71%, and then Asia is the second place with 13%. So still a bit European-centric, the audience, but also from the time, of course, it's maybe most convenient for participants in Europe. Okay, so thanks a lot. That was just to practice a little bit the live polls. The next live polls that we have are more focused and on the topic for today. But now it's my great pleasure to introduce the actual speaker, the actual expert for today, because it will be myself presenting the topic, but it will be Atte Länsisalmi from Nokia in Espoo in Finland. Atte is a senior specialist for standardization with Nokia Bell Labs. Even though he doesn't look like that, but he has more than a quarter century of experience in various positions on research and standardization concerning different technologies in 3GPP, but also other organizations. But now his main focus actually is on the industrial IoT in general, and he's also a very active contributor to 5G-ACIA. He's the vice chair of the working group 3 that we have. Working group 3 is dealing with architecture and technology. And he was also the rapporteur of a key work item that we had in 5G-ACIA on non-public networks, in which we investigated and analyzed different approaches to build up such non-public networks. And this resulted basically in a highly cited white paper on the topic, which is more or less a standard reference, I would say. And this is exactly what he will talk about today. So he will give us an overview of what has been done in 5G-ACIA already. And he's really the best expert that I could think of for taking care of that. So thanks a lot, Atte, for taking the time for being with us today. And with that, I would hand over to you.
Thank you, Andreas, for the kind welcoming words. And hello and warm welcome to all the participants also from my side. Let me bring up the presentation so we can get started. It is my pleasure to be here today with you to talk about the 5G non-public networks for manufacturing. It is certainly an interesting and important topic, as Andreas has outlined just before, and we had very, very interesting discussions about this in 5G-ACIA, and this has been a topic for the standardization teams in our company to get it established in 3GPP. I would like to start the presentation by giving an overview of the concept and then proceed into giving examples of some practical deployment scenarios and the work we have done in this area in 5G-ACIA. So what is a non-public network? This is a quite unique term to say the least, so it's best to start from defining it. As the term says, it's not a public network. Public network, or public land mobile network, or PLMN for short, is used for providing the mobile communication services for the general public. They are the cellular networks we all know as users. And 3GPP that I mentioned before is the organization responsible for defining standards for them. So non-public networks they are used for providing mobile communication services for closed group of users and not the general public. And this is enabled by some new capabilities that were introduced into 3GPP standard in release 16 that was completed this year. In general, the term private network means the same thing as non-public network, as Andreas pointed out earlier. And well, our industries are notorious for using acronyms, and often just the acronym NPN is used as well. And throughout my presentation, I will be using these terms completely synonymously, and I hope you can bear along with me. Why is 5G-NPN then relevant for manufacturing? Andreas already started on the reasons for that, and in this slide we have listed some reasons that also have helped to shape the NPN solutions to begin with. So an NPN is separate from all other networks. What happens in other networks will not affect this private network, and the public network users will not be able to access the private network. And data transmitted in the private network and data about the private network will always remain within the manufacturing premises, thus private, considering this is a private network for a manufacturing premise. 5G introduces many capabilities that are very interesting for manufacturing industries, as already outlined, such as the ultra-low latency and ultra-high reliability that are often mentioned in this context. And having these features available in just any public network is not a feasible assumption. To be able to use them in their fullest extent, separation in the form of private networking is really needed. And private network gives better control over all the features available in the network and can give access to the network operational information to the enterprise using the private network. And also the accountability for the network operation is kept very clear. And for example, it can be held completely in-house for the enterprise if so desired. So again, these are some reasons why 5G private networking may be interesting. And some of these were actually driving the standards development for it. So 3GPP has recently defined the standards for NPNs, along with the long history of defining standards for PLMNs, the public networks. However, the technologies used for NPN are not something completely new and different, because most, if not all, the 5G features can be used in NPNs, and 3GPP actually only needed to make few additions and changes to make the regular 5G standards work also for private networking. And 3GPP has done this for two types of NPNs. And I have here the first one, which is the standalone NPN. And as the name says, this is a standalone network from the perspective that it does not rely on any PLMN functions. It can be a small or large network, but it is a full-blown 5G network of its own. And because this SNPN is a separate network and it is not a PLMN connected to the global network of PLMNs as a peer network, some requirements or restrictions that are designed for the PLMNs do not apply here. For example, the security algorithms can be chosen more freely. To make it known that a network is a private network, the SNPN is separated from PLMNs by its ID, which is a combination of PLMN ID and network identifier NID. All 3GPP networks use this PLMN ID as an identifier, and it consists of 3 digits of mobile country code, MCC, and 2 digits of mobile network code, MNC. The allocation of the MCC is coordinated centrally by ITU. And MCC 999 is allocated for private networks and can be used for the SNPNs as well. And the reason I'm digging into detail about the ID here is because the MNC for networks under the country code 999 and the NID are currently self-allocated, and the allocation is not centrally coordinated. And this self-allocation allows to start using the technology very easily, but the fact that the uniqueness of the network ID is not guaranteed can cause problems down the road. And the mobile communication community is currently discussing how to address the issue. And the second type of 3GPP defined NPNs is public network integrated NPN, or PNI-NPN as the acronym stands. And in this NPN type, the NPN is built into a hosting public network. It is using the PLMN infrastructure, but it's logically separated from it. And the PNI-NPN subscribers, they're essentially a class of hosting PLMN subscribers who get a specified NPN service. And in addition, parts of the PLMN can be dedicated to the NPN subscribers. For example, it's possible to build a dedicated 5G NPN radio access network for manufacturing hall. And this is enabled by using closed access group technology that is defined for this exact purpose. So the PNI-NPNs, they're identified by the combination of the hosting PLMN ID and closed access group ID. the CAC ID that needs to be unique inside the PLMN, and the PLMN ID for a public network will be unique by definition. So here we don't have such a issue that I mentioned earlier. Now, when talking about private networks, it's actually necessary to mention the concept of network slicing, which you may have heard of. It is one of the key concepts that was introduced to 5G from the very beginning, and it allows logical segmentation of a single 5G network infrastructure for different purposes. Each of these network slices can support different group of users with different service profiles. And this concept suits the PNI-NPNs, the public network integrated NPNs, very well, and it is very likely to be an implementation solution for them. Furthermore, I should point out that in cloud-based implementations, as shown in the slide here, automation and self-optimization can be used to assure the network is flexible to begin with, and it can also adapt to changing situations, thus always performing in the best possible way. And I would also like to mention that network slicing can be used for the standalone NPNs as well, or inside them, to serve different needs of different use cases there, such as industrial control, some monitoring or maintenance data collection or firmware update, and so on. Now that we have gone over the main concepts and technologies related to NPNs, let's go to more practical level and look at the NPN deployment scenarios. We have those two different NPN types defined by 3GPP, but there are actually many ways to deploy the network, each having different benefits and drawbacks. And in 5G-ACIA, we selected 4 prominent ways to deploy NPNs for manufacturing and industrial domain, and we published a white paper on them, also including evaluation of them for different uses. And the white paper is available on the 5G-ACIA website. And in the next section, I will be talking about NPNs from the deployment perspective, using this work as a reference. But before going to the deployment scenarios, let's make a quick live ball on your estimation about the arrival time of 5G NPNs. So the question is, when does your area of business expect or need 5G NPN deployment? And the choices should be visible now on your screen. So do you expect this to happen within the next 2 years or so, or within 2 to 5 years, or 5 to 8 years, or even after 8 years? We know that the cycles are different in different industries, so there may be a different perception on the timelines. So it's interesting to see your responses. And the time went, and we see the responses here, and vast majority are with the opinion that it happens either within the next 2 years or at least within the 5 years. And this very well aligns with the sense of urgency that we have seen in the development of the standards in 3GPP, as well as the work we have done in 5G-ACIA. Now, first, I would like to devise you with some information on how to evaluate the deployment scenarios that we will be talking about in just a moment. These are This slide shows the basic steps on how to choose the right NPN type, and that's what you would need this evaluation criteria for. And the process itself is rather simple and self-evident. The first thing to consider is what the private network will be used for, and the second step is to evaluate how well the options would support the planned use. Now, in 5G-ACIA work that we did, we suggest that the evaluation is done using selected service attributes that stem from the planned network use cases. And in addition to this, it's also suggested that the different aspects would be weighted based on their importance. What are these selected service attributes then? There are probably many features that are desired from a 5G NPN, but only some of them affect the network type selection. And in 5G-ACIA work, we looked at all documented industrial 5G use cases and identified some features that are most critical for the network selection question. And these are what we call the selected service aspects. We organize them in 4 groups, and they are as follows. The device connectivity, which is about whether the devices can connect to networks globally and how smooth the transition or handover, if you will, to and from other networks will be. The QoS, which is mainly concerning how easily stringent latency and availability requirements can be supported. The operation and management, which specifically concerns whether access to the controls of the 5G network, 5G NPN, or the related information is available to the enterprise using the NPN. And the privacy and security, where the key points are sort of twofold, starting from whether privacy of any data in the network is provided through isolation of networks, and whether the security mechanism can be chosen freely, or sort of on the flip side of that, whether used security mechanism can be assumed to be globally available. So we believe that analysis against these attributes will help to see the difference between the main NPN types, and it's not necessary to look, sort of map each and every possible feature that you would be desiring from an NPN. Now let's finally move on to the 4 deployment scenarios. The first scenario maps with the 3GPP defined standalone NPN scenario. This is basically just that. The private network is completely separate from other networks, and the enterprise has full control over the network and access to all information related to it. They have the freedom to operate the network to their liking, but also the responsibility over it. That said, in principle, nothing prevents subcontracting the network service responsibilities or handling to a third-party provider. And as said previously, the SNPN cannot be connected to other PLMNs as a peer network. So if access to PLMN services is desired, it requires a second subscription from a public network service provider. Starting from this second scenario, which is radio access network sharing scenario, we move on to scenarios where another network is involved with the NPN one way or the other. So in this scenario, we still have the standalone NPN, just like in the previous slide, but the RAN is built together with another network, typically a PLMN, but it could also be another SNPN. And the scenario is using the RAN sharing technology, which has been supported by 3GPP standards for quite some time already in the previous releases, and it has been used by 3GPP operators to save effort in building radio network coverage by using just one set of shared equipment. This is a bit of a special case all in all, but it may also apply to some SNPN scenarios. And one of the reasons we highlighted it originally here is because in this scenario, an enterprise with their SNPN can start a fruitful cooperation with a PLMN operator, which can then help if also accessing public network services would be relevant. Now we proceed to NPNs with shared infrastructure with the PLMN, in other words, the PNI-NPNs, or the public network integrated NPNs. And in this first version, the enterprise could have dedicated radio access network resources in its premises with this closed access group functionality in operation, and would have their own gateway for the data, which is called UPF, in their premises, so that the NPN data can be kept there and it never exits the boundaries of the facility. Network slicing, as said, fits this scenario very well, and alternatively, the dedicated APN technology could be used for NPN users and their traffic. This is a 4G solution really, and is not as versatile and effective as network slicing, but basically it means that all data from a given set of subscribers always is routed to a certain gateway, which essentially would establish what the sort of topology idea in this scenario was. So, as previously mentioned, the PNI-NPN subscribers, they're subscribers to the hosting PLMN, so also access to hosting PLMN services can be arranged easily if needed. And as NPN is part of the PLMN operator has the main responsibility over the network operation and may still provide access to some network operation and management functions, or at least the related information if so desired by the enterprise. And just one thing for clarity, while this scenario is titled NPN with shared RAN and control plane, this is not the same RAN sharing that was discussed in the previous slide, as here the NPN is part of the PLMN already, and it's not a separate 3GPP network of its own that could get into this kind of RAN sharing agreement. In the fourth and last solution, we have again a PNI-NPN, where the NPN is provided as a service to the enterprise by the public network, and the enterprise does not need to participate in the network operation basically at all. Again, network slicing or dedicated APN applies in this solution, and to assure radio operation meets the required quality criteria, dedicated radio resources and closed access group naturally apply to this case as well. But in this scenario, the dedicated gateway inside the enterprise premises is not included, and due to this, the data leaves the enterprise premises and would then be routed back from the operator's network, which may also entail difficulties to meet the most stringent latency requirements. But otherwise, the performance of this scenario is like the previous scenario. This slide shows a summary of the analysis we did on the scenarios in 5G-ACIA. I will not go through it now. It is available in the white paper, and it also includes more detailed explanations of these words in the table. So what we did is that we analyzed the scenarios against each of the service attributes and gave them a score on what we call a degree of compliance. And the score is either high, medium, or low, depending on how well or easily that service attribute is supported in the scenario. And all this is described in more detail in the white paper. Now that we have gone through the scenarios, I would like to make another live poll with you and ask your opinion about these scenarios. Which NPN scenario do you consider to be the most relevant? Is it the standalone, isolated deployment where there is no connection to other networks whatsoever? Or is it the RAN sharing one where that standalone NPN works together with the public network operator to extend the coverage? Or is it one of the two public network integrated NPN scenarios, either the third one here in the list that includes much control for the enterprise, or the last one which doesn't require the enterprise to do any controls? And the timer ran out, and we actually have quite even distribution of responses, I would say, but the standalone isolated NPN clearly does stand out in the crowd. So that, and if we sort of bundle these so that first two are about SNPNs and the last two are PNI-NPNs, the standalone cases really stand out. Thank you for your responses. Okay, well, there are some additional considerations also that did not quite stand out in the method of analysis for selected service attributes. The first one of these things is access to spectrum, and it's actually rather an important topic as it is not possible to implement an NPN otherwise. For SNPN, either licensed or unlicensed spectrum is required, and the enterprise operating the SNPN needs to take care of this. There are already solutions in this space, so it's entirely possible in most regions of the world. For PNI-NPNs, access to spectrum is already part of the deal, so that takes care of it. Spectrum is a topic of its own. We did not cover it in this part of the 5G-ACIA work, but we do have a dedicated working group for those matters, and they have also looked into this particular case. So if you are interested, please do join the team. Currently, this work is only available for 5G-ACIA members. So the second topic is the cost and effort related to operating an NPN. The analysis did touch this a little bit already. The PNI-NPNs is, for PNI-NPNs, this is again part of the service deal, so nothing to worry about. And for SNPNs, this effort is solely on the enterprise, which does take effort and requires specific knowledge. But again, business models where it is possible to acquire all of this sort of as a service may apply here as well. Finally, here we have the SNPN identity uniqueness topic, which I mentioned in the beginning. It still requires some work from the community, but this is not a reason to wait with the deployments, as it is entirely possible to start operation using the assigned identities. I'm just raising this to raise your interest and potentially invite some of you to follow the work and join the discussion, where I hope solution will be reached rather soon. So I would like to now wrap up quickly with some takeaways. So 5G-ACIA works on these topics, and it's the forum that you should join for these kind of discussions. 5G-ACIA, sorry, let me get to the second point. So 3GPP has standardized 2 NPN types. In release 16, we have the standalone NPN and public network integrated NPN. The 5G-ACIA white paper describes the basics for NPN deployment scenarios for industrial domain and evaluates them. And that document is available to you. And the planned use of the NPN really determines which deployment scenario is the best. 5G-ACIA leads the discussion on use cases and key technologies for industrial 5G. So again, any of you who are interested in joining, it is very much recommended. And as a proof of what I said, that 5G-ACIA leads the discussion here are a couple more white papers. We have discussed about the NPN white paper, but we also have a white paper for integrating industrial Ethernet protocols into NPN, and also this exposure of 5G capabilities, which is about how the 5G network presents itself to the enterprise operating it. So that completes my part of the presentation. Thank you very much. And now back to you, Andreas.
Yeah, we thank you, Atte, for this excellent overview of the topic, and for also giving the presentation just in time. That's great, because then we have some time left for answering some of the many questions that came up. I think Ignacio showed again that, of course, NPNs, this is a new topic. So apart from the new capabilities that 5G can provide, that's really a major novelty of 5G, that we can set up NPNs. And you also showed that it's not black and white, so there are different flavors, what this could look like. And of course, also specific challenges, for example, with the identification of NPNs, because we are simply running out of identifiers if you want to do it in the way it has been done for the public mobile networks in the past. So I think this was a nice overview. Of course, you also referred to the white papers, where some of the things can also be read again, and there are some further details are given. But now I would like to just bring up some of the questions that came up, and thanks to everyone for posting your questions. You can still keep on posting questions in the Q&A window if you have any, and we will try our best to address as many as possible of them now. So the first question, I think you basically answered it already, or gave some insights during the presentation, but it's certainly a very central question. That's why I would like to bring it up again. So it's who will manage NPNs? Will it be operators, company owners, or third-party companies?
I think all of the three apply. So it really depends on the case. So SNPNs, they could be operated by the enterprises or some specialized third-party companies that specialize in doing so, which could include the public network operators. And naturally, the public network integrated NPNs are owned and operated by the public network operators.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So then another relevant question is, in which frequency bands will standalone non-public networks be operated? Is a license necessary, for example, by the regulatory authorities? And maybe can you give us some insights in the frequency bands that might be applicable here?
Well, I'm not the best expert to discuss about the frequency bands. What I can say is that there is a possibility to build a 5G NPN using the unlicensed frequencies, and that type of network may be sufficient for some use cases, but maybe not all of them. And there are things coming into play, such as being able to physically separate the network from surrounding areas so that the unlicensed other users of the frequency will not be bothering. I think that probably the person asking the question is more interested in licensed frequencies, which certainly are let me say, the prime target for the NPNs. And for those, the situation is varying in the world. I would not be able to give you the frequency bands of any region or country off the top of my head. But this exactly is the type of information that we have available internally to the 5G-ACIA audience. So the members, we have done internal work on it, and the members will benefit from getting this information.
Yeah, thanks a lot also for promoting 5G-ACIA, of course. Just wondering, can you maybe give some brief remarks on at least the general bands? Of course, we distinguish between the low bands, the mid bands, and the high bands. So where do you see, if we have an NPN running on dedicated spectrum, so which of these bands will be most suitable for that?
Well, as from the networking technology perspective, it makes no difference. And I'm a networking technology person here, so the likelihood greatly depends on what is available in different regions, and that's the part I really cannot comment. Not even on the level that you were asking. I have to apologize.
Okay, no worries. So then maybe we move on to the next question. That might be also a tough one, but let's try. If you have any insights here, is a legal intercept point mandatory for different flavors of NPNs? So I guess the question is, in public networks, of course, there is sometimes a requirement to have some a point like this. So do we also need this for standalone non-public networks, if it's shared with a RAN, if you have RAN sharing with an operator, for example, a classical operator, or also if it's a public network integrated NPN?
Right. So I know for sure that the legal intercept requirements, they apply to public networks, again depending on the local legislation on where the network is applied, and thus this may apply also to the PNI-NPNs, but unfortunately I don't know exactly for sure even that point. This is one of the details that I did not manage to check before. I think 3GPP does have provisions on this one as well, so it's perhaps something that we can check. So whoever is asking that question, please contact me via email, and I can try to find the answer for you.
Okay, great. Yeah, and it certainly was also a hard one. So then the next question is, yeah, I mean, when do you think that NPNs will take off? I think we have also seen that in the live poll, so the view of different people here. But in the second part of the question, will they become as common as Wi-Fi networks in manufacturing today?
Well, 5G certainly has the potential of serving the vertical very well, and 5G offering is coming into similar forms as the Wi-Fi offering. So I think you could envision that there is everything in place for it to become as common as Wi-Fi today is, and it is clear that the Wi-Fi we have seen today in the industrial environment is does not perform as well as 5G will. So that's another argument for seeing this, but it's seeing this happening. But it's really difficult to make that estimation. It depends on what direction the market will take.
Okay, I think time will tell, and then we will see how this will compete basically to some extent with Wi-Fi, or whether it will be coexistence. So I guess in 2-3 years from now, we will have a much better insight into that. So then another general question, only slightly related to NPNs, I would say, but NPN deployments in manufacturing depend also on the availability of industrial-grade 5G chipsets. So what is your view? When will these chipsets, especially industrial-grade chipsets, be available? Do you have any opinion on that?
Well, that's again a difficult question. I represent a network manufacturer and do not have access to this information, unfortunately.
Okay, yeah, don't worry. So it's 3 tough questions, and there are many questions coming in. That's very good. So keep on posting your questions. So also a question I think which you basically addressed in your presentation, but maybe it's good to emphasize this again. So on a totally private network, so I guess the participant means a standalone non-public network. Would the devices be able to roam to a public network when leaving the geographical region of the NPN?
Well, for that one, I certainly can answer. So devices that are only subscribing to a standalone NPN will not be able to roam to the PLMNs or to the public networks. For that capability, a separate subscription to public network is needed. And of course, we have solutions where one device can have multiple subscriptions. We have smartphones today that can do that, but obviously it's a little bit cumbersome solution, but it is possible at least.
All right, great, thanks. So then there's another question which is again a little bit related to spectrum, but I guess that's an easier one to answer. So is CBRS a viable option for, getting spectrum that might be used for setting up a non-public network?
As far as I know, yes.
Maybe I should also clarify for everyone, maybe not everyone in the audience is familiar with CBRS. So that's, of course, the approach taking in North America to provide more local access to spectrum. And the simple answer from Atte, you have heard it, of course, was yes. I think that's also in line with my view, so that, of course, you could use the spectrum then to set up non-public networks. Okay, so then also slightly related to spectrum, there are many questions regarding spectrum coming up. So can standalone NPNs also use spectrum from a telco operator? Oh, would you see that?
Well, yeah, I think a spectrum guy would again be here good and would talk for a long time. Let me say that from the networking principles perspective, there is nothing prohibiting using any spectrum for which the system is configured. Now, to set up a system into a mode where it expects dedicated spectrum, then means that the system really uses that spectrum. And basically, if an NPN, you could envision a situation where the public network operator sublicenses some of the spectrum to an NPN player or operator. So that kind of situation is certainly technically very possible. And I think some of the spectrum allocation schemes that I've heard discussed already imply this kind of, let me say, business model where sublicensing of spectrum is allowed.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a good example also of how NPNs may have an impact on the ecosystem and also established value chains and so on. Of course, it's somehow something new, right? And it comes with new concepts, new players, and there might be a lot of things changing in the ecosystem. A lot of innovation may come up, new business models, and so on. And I think what you just mentioned would be one example for that. So that in, of course, one model could be a subleasing of spectrum from an public mobile network operator to a local enterprise or so to set up a non-public network. But it's, I think, also something that will develop over the coming weeks, and then not weeks, sorry, years, and then we will see how things turn out at the end.
Indeed.
Okay, so maybe a last question, and then we already have to wrap up. So do we see requirements of managing device subscriptions to NPNs through capability exposure?
That's one of the areas that the capability exposure work in 5G-ACIA addresses. So yes, indeed.
Yeah, and this was also a nice bridge. Thanks for pointing this out. So we have maybe also just information for everyone. So we have a dedicated work item actually focusing on capability exposure. So how to also integrate in a non-public network, for example, in more the enterprise IT environment, which is different, of course, from what we have in the classical telco area. And that might be a topic maybe for a future web seminar. So I showed the 4 different web seminars of this first series. We're already working on a second series, and certainly that might be a topic on the agenda then for one of the upcoming web seminars later this year. So stay tuned and just follow what we are doing and offering, and maybe then we can deep dive into this very soon. With that, we are already close to the end of the web seminar. So thanks a lot again, Atte, really for taking your time, for sharing your insights with us. Was really a great overview of the topic. And I mentioned it before, you were driving these activities also in 5G-ACIA, and therefore certainly are an excellent expert for that. Thank you very much for that. I think we got a feeling now that this is something new. I also mentioned it several times, where we still have to see where this is leading to. So what kind of innovation is coming up and so on, new models, technical architectures, business models, and so on. We have seen it's not black and white. You can have just a network slice on the public network of an operator. That's maybe one extreme. The other extreme would be really have a standalone on public network, maybe even being operated on a dedicated license that you might get directly from the regulator. So there's a wide variety now. It's opening up very exciting times to follow this and to see this happening. And of course, also something that we will further track and discuss in 5G-ACIA. There was one question also from the audience, so how you could become a part of the team, basically become a member of 5G-ACIA. The easiest way is just to reach out to us, send us an email, and then we would be happy to send you an information package with all the details. I just can say it's worth it. We have very many interesting topics, many more, of course, than what we are presenting in these web seminars these days. And everybody supporting the overall goal of 5G-ACIA is very much welcome to join us and to become part of the team. So that's it for today. Here you can see on the slides the announcement of the next web seminar. I already mentioned this at the beginning of today. So the next one will take place on the 9th of September between 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. CEST. And the next web seminar will be a bit different from the previous ones because it will be a panel discussion. We will have various people holding leadership positions in 5G-ACIA as part of these panels, plus some selected and highly distinguished guests. And we will then have more an interactive discussion among the panelists, but also including the audience, of course, on industrial 5G in general, myths and reality. So to see what is maybe just a bit overhyped, and certainly there are topics maybe which take a bit longer than originally expected and so on, but also what is already happening today, what is the reality today, and of course also about the great opportunities and remaining challenges that still need to be addressed. So it would be great to see many of you again in early September in the next web seminar. As I mentioned before, if there are any questions that could not be answered today, and I've seen many in the Q&A window, so then feel free to directly reach out to us, just send an email to info@5g-acia.org, and we will take care of that. And yeah, thanks again to Atte, thanks to everyone for joining And with that, we end the web seminar for today. So have a good day. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.